She was born beneath the quiet shadows of a coastal city, where the sea whispered secrets to the shore and the sky hung low with dreams. Her life began modestly, her parents tending to their craft with quiet dignity, her father a fisherman, her mother a weaver of linen and stories. From a young age, she understood the rhythm of tides, the hush of longing, and the unspoken language of resilience. She would sit by the window every evening, sketching verses into old notebooks while the wind curled like a lover's sigh around her home. Even as a child, her eyes held 1,000 untold tales and a fierce spark of destiny. What no one knew then was that the very lines she wrote would one day become verses echoing in the heart of royalty. Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed Al Maktoum, the Crown Prince of Dubai, often said that poetry is the mirror of a soul, and it was this mirror that first reflected her into his world. Known for his piercing words and soulful stanzas, Sheikh Hamdan, Fazza to those who cherished his pen, lived between galloping horses and flying falcons, between silence and the ink-stained truth of his verses. The poems he wrote were wild yet elegant, like the desert itself. One day, among a sea of admirers, he stumbled upon one of her anonymous poems shared under a pen name. It was a gentle yet powerful echo of his own heart, a meeting of two flames in the realm of rhyme. She grew up learning to live with less but dreaming of more, not material riches, but a life defined by meaning and movement. She studied literature by candlelight, read ancient texts borrowed from a library that smelled of dust and secrets, and learned to translate her struggles into art. Her world changed the day she won a national poetry competition. She didn't even attend the award ceremony, feeling her place was still among the faceless, until she received a letter, not typed, not printed, but written in the neat, deliberate script of Fazza himself. In it were only 2 lines. Your words reminded me of stars I thought I'd lost. Keep writing. The desert listens. From that moment, her world bloomed. Not into opulence, but into resonance. They began exchanging poems like secrets passed between twilight and dawn. She responded in verses, wrapping her gratitude in metaphor, hiding her awe behind soft similes. Fazza replied in kind, not just with passion, but with understanding. His poems began to carry her voice within them, so subtly that only the two of them knew. It was a courtship of minds, of letters strung together like pearls on the string of fate. Though oceans and palaces separated them, in poetry, they met with the intimacy of 2 hearts whispering beneath the same moon. As the seasons passed, her life transformed from one of invisible struggle to gentle reverence. She never sought spotlight or grandeur. Even when the royal convoy arrived quietly one evening, her neighbors stared in disbelief as the guards stood not in pomp, but in quiet respect. Sheikh Hamdan, dressed not as a prince but as a poet, stepped out and asked her parents for her hand with the same humility he wrote with. It was not her beauty, though radiant, that had captivated him. It was her spirit, carved in resilience and rhymed in truth. His proposal was sealed with a poem. You are the echo to my silence, the ink that understands the quill. I met you where the words run deep, and time itself stood still. Her life from then was no fairy tale, but something more sacred and unfolding. Together, they journeyed through deserts and cities, but always returned to poetry as their home. She inspired his verses to soar deeper, he gave hers the wings of legacy. Even amidst royal duties, council meetings, and international visits, they wrote to each other. Sometimes in torn pages. Sometimes in books bound by gold. The world often speculated about Sheikh Hamdan's muses, but only a few lines ever revealed her fully. She writes like lightning touching sand, leaves flames no eye can see, and in her silence, kingdoms fall, to verses meant for me. Despite the gold-lined walls of the palace, she remained rooted in humility. She continued to host poetry circles for young girls, especially those from underserved backgrounds, and she read aloud the words of Sheikh Hamdan with tears in her eyes, not as a wife proud of her husband's fame, but as a poet eternally inspired by another poet's soul. She taught them that royalty lies not in bloodlines, but in the boldness to speak when the world demands silence. Through her, Sheikh Hamdan's poems gained a new breath, a sacred stillness between the lines that only a soulmate could create. Even in celebration, she remained a mystery to many, a woman cloaked in verses instead of veils. Her background was not adorned with jewels or titles, yet it shimmered in the glow of dignity and truth. When foreign dignitaries asked her about her past, she would smile and quote her favorite line from Fazza's poetry. She needed no crown to be queen, only her own fierce grace. And indeed, she ruled, not through decree or dominion, but through compassion and clarity, two things that Sheikh Hamdan had always yearned to find beyond the marble of royal halls. Years passed, and their poems became chapters of shared love and memory. It was clear that her life story had become not just his muse, but his compass. Together, they redefined what poetry could be, not just a lyrical lament or royal amusement, but a bridge. They used their verses to fund literacy programs, to build libraries in forgotten villages, and to encourage the youth of the Arab world to pick up pens instead of despair. She became a symbol, not of fantasy, but of possibility. A reminder that greatness can rise from the quietest corners, and that true royalty is written not on a birth certificate, but in the soul's capacity to dream. Her background was humble, yes. But in her humility, there was fire. In her silence, a symphony. In her journey, a revolution of softness in a world that too often equated strength with noise. Sheikh Hamdan, the poet prince, did not change her life, he amplified it. And in return, she gave him something rarer than diamonds, rarer than thrones, the mirror of his truest self. Through her, his words became not just beautiful, but eternal. In the end, their story was never about status, but about soul. Never about escape, but elevation. Their poems live on now in golden frames, etched on palace walls and village schools alike. Each line is a pulse of their shared journey. And whenever someone asks who she was before the palace, the answer is simple. She was poetry before she was a princess. And that is why Sheikh Hamdan loved her beyond life, beyond lines,